The NBA draft, 4 weeks away, and it is time for our very first mock draft on CBS Sports HQ. I'm Chris Hassel, joined by our 3 mock general managers, Gary Parrish, Adam Finkelstein, and Kyle Boone, of course. And these guys are going to play our mock GMs for the full first round of our mock here. And the Orlando Magic are picking number 1. I think we know the 3 guys who are going to go 1, 2, 3. We just don't know the specific order at this point. Jabari Smith is the favorite to go number 1 right now, by minus 210 or so in Vegas. But Chet Holmgren is certainly a possibility, along with Paolo Bancaro. Gary Parrish, you are picking for the Magic, who the last time they had the number 1 pick took Dwight Howard back in 2004.
With the first pick in the 2022 NBA draft, you put me in charge. The Orlando Magic are selecting Chet Holmgren out of Gonzaga. Simply put, I think he's got the highest upside, the most potential of any prospect in this draft. And I understand there are some concerns about his body, his frame, whether he'll ever be able to put on enough weight or be strong enough to actually flourish in the NBA. But I've made this point in other places. In 2018, it's pretty clear at this point Luca Doncic should have been the number 1 pick in that NBA draft, and yet he wasn't. He went 3rd. And the reason he went 3rd is because people were focusing on things that were perceived problems that actually haven't been problems at all. A lack of athleticism, maybe his first step isn't as quick as it needs to be. Will he be able to get off shots in the NBA against NBA-level athletes with size? Obviously, he can do all of the things he did in Europe in the NBA, and he has become an undeniable superstar. Not comparing Chet Holmgren to Luca Doncic as a player. They're obviously very different. But my point is, if you focus too much on Chet Holmgren's frame, body, you miss all of the obvious stuff that gives him a chance to someday be a franchise big and an NBA All-Star.
Yeah, Gary, I couldn't agree with you more there. I think that the body is gonna take care of itself eventually. If there's one thing that NBA programs know how to do, it's how to put muscle mass on their guys. And going back to when he was a high school underclassman, Chet was always kind of skinny, but he was never soft. I mean, this is a kid who knows how to battle. He's very much the modern day NBA big man. I know that the center position has never been less emphasized across the board in the NBA, but this is not a conventional center. This is someone who can bring the ball up the floor and start the break, who can shoot the 3, who's quick off his feet athletically, and who's also an elite rim protector with phenomenal defensive instinct. So I agree with you. I think he's got the highest upside in this draft.
And I'm going to go ahead and agree with my fellow GMs here. I would take Chet Holmgren at number 1. There are going to be questions, right, about what he can't do at the NBA level, especially with the frame being as small as it is at 7 foot and just under 200 pounds. But I think there is a lack of appreciation for what he can do. And he can do a lot of things on both ends of the floor. Rated 94th percentile last season in defensive situations around the basket. That's according to Synergy. It was top 10 in block rate, 99th percentile in offensive situations around the basket. And that is, again, according to Synergy. So very efficient two-way player. He was not asked to be kind of the alpha on a really loaded Gonzaga team, but I think he is just scratching the surface of what he's going to eventually be at the NBA level. And at the NBA level, I think he can be a future All-Star.
All right, Kyle, going to come right back to you because we are making you the mock general manager of the Thunder, who have multiple picks, one of several teams that has multiple picks in this first-round mock. Who are you taking for the Thunder?
Yeah, with the number 2 pick in the 2022 NBA draft, the Thunder are going to select Jabari Smith Jr. from Auburn. An elite catch-and-shoot threat, especially for his size. He shot 42% from the three-point line last season as a true freshman. At 6'10", he became the second freshman in college hoops history to ever make 73 pointers and 100 free throws, joining a guy named Kevin Durant, who has turned out to be a pretty darn good NBA player in his own right. So really think the sky is the limit for Jabari Smith. It really showed some promising development throughout the season as a shooter. The Thunder clearly need to add some front court depth and some talent, and I think Jabari Smith, if Chet Holmgren is off the board, Jabari Smith is the obvious answer for OKC here at number 2.
I would seriously consider Paolo Bancaro with this pick. because I think he's got a shot to be a star as well. But I can't argue against this in any sort of meaningful way. Jabari Smith is a terrific prospect. You know, a 6'10" athlete who can guard multiple positions, plays hard, really competes, and can reliably knock down a three-point shot. And not just reliably knock it down, that sells him short. He's a great three-point shooter with great size, for somebody who plays on the perimeter. So I think the worst case scenario for Jabari Smith is that, he's a decade-long NBA player who, can guard multiple positions out on the perimeter, switch everything, and knock down corner threes and one dribble pull-ups and two dribble pull-ups forever. The best case scenario is that he becomes more of a creative playmaker, and now you've got a total package that allows him to possibly be, one of the very best players in the entire world.
Yeah, guys, a couple things on this front. First of all, I think Jabari has improved more in the last year than either of the other candidates, if you put Paolo in that category, to be the number one pick. He's really made gigantic strides. If you didn't see him in high school, you'd be shocked to know that he wasn't a polished floor spacer back then. And now he's not only a polished floor spacer, he's a tough shot maker. And between that and his defensive versatility, that really fits the modern day NBA. The thing that concerns me, though, is when you start talking about whether or not he can be a star, I just think he's got to impact the game more inside the paint. He attempted a very low percentage of shots at the rim. Really a scary number. I think it was 16% of his total field goal attempts. Conversely, Paolo and Chet were both in the 40th percentile in terms of the amount of shots they took at the rim. So I want to see that improve. I want to see him assert himself there. But in terms of the way he fits the modern day NBA, I can't disagree with any of the logic.
And Adam, it would seem to make the Rockets pick at number 3 basically pretty easy, right? I mean, we've heard you guys talk about the three guys that are going to go 1, 2, 3, maybe not in this specific order, but Chet Holmgren went 1 in our draft. Jabari Smith just goes 2. So at 3, it would have to be Paolo Bancaro, right?
Yes. The formality with the third pick in the NBA draft, we're going to take Paolo Bancaro. Here's the thing about Paolo, and I think this is the part that puts him more in contention for a top 2 pick than I think people are giving credence to. He was the best high school freshman in the country 4 years ago. This year, I think you can make a strong argument that he was the best college freshman in the country. He has been the best of these players from start to finish so far. And that is incredibly hard to do, and it speaks to his mindset. Typically, when you get a 15-year-old kid and you tell them they're the number 1 player in the country, they rest on their laurels. They lose all sense of humility. Paolo was the exact opposite. He's continued to get better at each step along the way, and now he's a 6'10", 250-pound jumbo playmaker. And I just think that alpha mentality is something that we're not talking quite enough about. So in Houston, him and Jalen Green, I'm a little concerned about the fact that neither one of them prioritizes the defensive end of the floor. But at number 3, I think he's an absolute no-brainer.
Yeah, and I like this pick as well, Adam. I'm going to agree with you again. I think Bancaro's polished, especially on the offensive end, is absolutely going to be a trait that is going to translate to the NBA, especially after drafting Jalen Green. I think Jaden Ivey should be in play in this range, but after drafting Jalen Green last year, to me, I think the obvious answer is Paolo Bancaro here. He grew up playing guard. I think he's a natural playmaker, and as his size at 6'10", I think that is going to be a trait that is going to translate to the NBA level. Really good in the mid-range. Would like to see him improve a little bit as a three-point shooter. And as you mentioned, Adam, the defense is something that I think he needs to work on to really be a full two-way player in the NBA. I have confidence that he can eventually do that. Again, he's been one of the most impactful players at every level that he's played at for the last 4 years. So I think his developmental trajectory is very promising. And at number 3, I think this is probably the best value here.
Yeah, the Rockets have the easiest job at the top of this draft because it is, most people agree, a 3-player draft. And when you're picking third in a 3-player draft, you just take whichever one falls to you. And I'm on record that Chet Holmgren should go number 1. But if somebody wanted to argue the guy is actually Paolo Bancaro, I can listen to that. I've gone back and forth between Holmgren, Smith, and Bancaro. I think they're all terrific. I could see any of them or all of them becoming NBA All-Stars. And, like Adam said, I've seen Paolo since he was, sophomore year in high school. And even back then, he looked like a Division I basketball player. Like you could drop him into a Duke basketball game when he was 16 years old and he would have been fine. And all he's done since then is get bigger, stronger, more skilled. There are some questions about, his athleticism, some questions about, who he's going to guard on the defensive end of the court because he was not spectacular at Duke in that specific area. But, man, he is so versatile and great on the offensive end that I have a lot of respect for Holmgren and Jabari Smith. But it would make me a little uneasy to pass on him. And if you're Houston, I think you're thrilled with the third pick in the draft, adding a guy of this caliber.
Likely a clear-cut top 3. So at number 4 with the Sacramento Kings is where things start to get a little bit more unpredictable. Adam, you have the pick for Sacramento.
Yeah, well, we are taking all 5 minutes that the NBA is allowing. We're about to walk up to the podium with one envelope, and then we're getting a call from ownership telling us to change our pick. So so with the Sacramento Kings, in all seriousness, with the context of the Kings, the fact that they just moved off Tyrese Halliburton, the fact that they are trying to make the playoffs next year, I'm going to go with Keegan Murray here because I think that is what they might do. Jaden Ivey is admittedly the 4th best prospect on my board, but for the reasons I previously stated, I think that Murray is a better fit for Sacramento. Sacramento just traded a future All-Star in Tyrese Halliburton to get Sabonis inside. In so doing, they became a slower team. If you were to pair Jaden Ivey and De'Aaron Fox in the backcourt, not to mention Davion Mitchell, you've got a 3-guard lineup which needs to play fast. I just don't think Ivey fits that. So while I think the first priority should be to try and trade this pick, I think if they don't have a good option there, they will look at Murray, who can step in at that 4 spot, score without having a lot of plays run for him. And if you talk about a player who has gotten better over the course of the last couple of years, you are talking about Keegan Murray. Had one Division I scholarship offer as a high school senior, made massive strides in his post-grad year at DME Academy, and has done it every year since, arguably the best player in college basketball this past season. I think he may be Sacramento's choice at 4.
Only player last season with 60 dunks and 63s. Let's move on to number 5. Kyle, you have the pick for the Detroit Pistons.
Yeah, I'm ecstatic that Adam has gone ahead and left Jaden Ivey on the board because at number 5 for the Detroit Pistons, I'm taking Jaden Ivey. He is the number 1 prospect on the CBS Sports big board right now. He is the most explosive athlete in this draft. I think this is excellent value. Get a guy who I can pair next to Cade Cunningham, who was the number 1 pick in last year's draft, and I think can ease some of the playmaking burden off of what Cade Cunningham is already shouldering with the Pistons. Jaden Ivey's explosiveness, his ability to kind of blow by defenders on offense, I think is going to be a really good fit in Detroit. There's definitely some questions about Jaden Ivey, projecting him long-term in the NBA. I will raise my hand and admit that. Defensively, he had some nightmarish sequences at Purdue as a sophomore this past season. And certainly I think he can improve as a playmaker too, as a passer. But taking all that into account, I do believe he has the highest ceiling among all prospects that are still on the board here at number 5. He has all-star potential. And so I'm scooping up Jaden Ivey at number 5.
Yeah, this is what I would also do here if he's available with the 5th pick. I'd take a hard look at Shaedon Sharpe out of Kentucky, and we'll get to him soon enough, I'm certain. But, yeah, I think I pull the trigger on Ivey. Just a terrific top-shelf athlete, really explosive in transition, vicious, violent dunks, and improved as a three-point shooter from his freshman year to his sophomore year. In that first year of college at Purdue, he only shot 26% from 3. As a sophomore, he shot 36% from 3. That is an indication that he really put in the work. And if you believe in that number and that it can continue to improve, well, when you've got an athlete with size who, can get to the rim over and over again, be explosive in transition and also reliably make a jumper, you take that guy with a 5th pick every opportunity you get.
Gary, you mentioned Shaedon Sharpe. You are up at number 6 with the pick for the Pacers.
And that's who we'll take. Shaedon Sharpe out of Kentucky. He's not a mystery because we've all seen him, but he is the guy at the top of this draft who didn't play college basketball. Now, he was eligible to play in the second semester at Kentucky, but I think the best way to describe it is his camp made a business decision that it wasn't in his best interest to join a team midseason and possibly damage what looks like guaranteed top 10 draft stock. Depending on who you talk to, there's some people who genuinely believe that if he would have played college basketball this past season, he would be more in the conversation to be the first pick in this draft. So if you can get him outside of the top 5, I think you feel pretty good with that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think he's the highest risk, highest reward prospect in the lottery. I think he would have had a very good chance to be a top 2 pick a year from now. The thing that I question about Shaedon, because, listen, he's got the size, he's got the length. We know he's an explosive vertical athlete. I also think he is a better shot maker and has more shooting potential than people are talking about. This is going to sound counterintuitive, but the thing that I question is actually his first step. I don't think he gets by guys in a straight line as often as people assume because they see the vertical athleticism, and he's going to need that to be a primary playmaker at the next level. So that and whether or not he's got the alpha personality, I think those are the variables that are kind of the swing categories for his future.
To number 7 we go. The Portland Trailblazers have the pick. Kyle playing mock GM for Portland.
Yeah, and at number 7 for the Portland Trailblazers, I'm going to select Duke's A.J. Griffin. While we're taking swings on potential guys with the highest upside, I think A.J. Griffin represents exactly that at number 7. He began the season injured at Duke. He was injured for much of his senior season, so there is some injury concern here and some questions about maybe his long-term ability to bounce back from some of these injuries. But took him some time to get into his groove. He emerged as, I think, one of the best shooting wings in this draft. He has a great physical frame, very tough, can thrive in the mid-range. He looks the part at 6'6" of a future two-way star if he can stay healthy. I think that is a legitimate question and why he might slip in this draft, but to me, a clear guy who is going in the top 10 of this draft and has star potential at number 7.
And our colleague David Cobb likes him even more than that. He has him going number 4 overall, so right behind that first flight in our top 3. Let's recap the first half of the lottery from our guys as we move through the first round of our first mock here on CBS Sports HQ. Chet, Jabari, Paolo, 1, 2, 3. Keegan Murray goes 4 to the Kings. Jaden Ivey rounding out the top 5, followed by Shaedon Sharpe to the Pacers and A.J. Griffin to Portland. The Pelicans, CBS Sports HQ. Chet Holmgren goes 1st overall to the Magic. Jabari Smith is the favorite to go number 1 overall if you're looking in Vegas and looking for a wager on the draft. He goes number 2 to Oklahoma City, and then Paolo Bancaro 3 to the Rockets. Those 3 guys looked at as the top 3 picks, maybe not in that exact order, but in some particular order. And then the question marks started 4. We had Keegan Murray going to the Kings, followed by Jaden Ivey, Shaedon Sharpe, and A.J. Griffin. All right, let's get to the back half of the lottery. Chris Hassel, joined by our 3 mock general managers, Gary Parrish, Adam Finkelstein, and Kyle Boone. Gary, you have the pick for the Pelicans at 8.
And I'm going to have New Orleans taking Ochai Agbaji, the 4-year star for the Kansas Jayhawks, who just won a national championship and was the most outstanding player, of course, of the Final Four. I'm higher, I can admit, on Agbaji than most, but I don't see what's not to like, other than you might be a little bothered that he's 3 or 4 years older than some of the other prospects that are going to go in the lottery of this draft. But a 6'5" wing who's a plus defender and shot above 40% from three-point range on 6.5 attempts per game. Like, what is not to like? And if you get him in New Orleans, the key is obviously getting Zion Williamson healthy, but then when he's healthy and on the court, surrounding him with shooters who can guard. And Ochai Agbaji, I think, obviously checks both of those boxes.
Yep, I really like this pick, GP, especially at number 8. Ochai Agbaji, I think, is a guy who's going to instantly contribute to a team like the Pelicans. The Pelicans last season ranked 27th among 30 NBA teams in three-point shooting percentage. Agbaji will instantly produce as a three-point shooter. Pelicans also the only lottery team this year who were also in the NBA playoffs. So they're in a window where not only are they competing for a playoff spot, they also have a chance to really add to this young core that they have, especially with Zion Williamson returning. You want to add shooters around Zion, just like GP said. I think Agbaji fits exactly that need. So number 8, I really like this pick.
Fingers crossed on Zion actually returning next season and staying healthy. That would be fun to see this Pelicans team healthy and all together after overachieving without Zion this past season. All right, number 9, the San Antonio Spurs with the first of 3 first-round selections. Adam with the pick.
We are going to take Arizona's Benedict Mathurin. He is someone that I had even higher on my board. I've got him at number 7. Reason being is that I think he's got a pretty significant upside, but also a fairly high floor. And he's kind of the last prospect on the board who fits that category in my mind. He's going to come in and I think at worst be a 3-and-D type player. He's got good positional size, solid length. His length ended up measuring out better than some people had reported during the course of his college season. I think he shoots a really good ball. He's projectable defensively. And given the rate of improvement, I do think there's a chance that he continues to evolve and becomes more than a role player. So given that combination of untapped upside and yet still a pretty high floor, we're taking him at number 9.
Let's round out the top 10 with the Washington Wizards. Gary Parrish has that pick.
We'll take Johnny Davis out of Wisconsin, which is one of the real great stories in college basketball this past season. This is a guy who was a whatever recruit coming out of high school, certainly not anybody who projected as an NBA player. And his freshman season, he was just a role player for the Badgers. But in this sophomore season, boy, he took off and put up some massive numbers. 19.7 points per game, 8.2 rebounds per game, shot not perfectly from three-point range, but he has done enough in his 2-year college career to suggest that he can be a reliable three-point shooter, with time in the NBA. To go from an off-the-radar guy to a possible top 10 pick like this, it is not a normal thing, but that is certainly what Johnny Davis has done, and he's going to be the latest Wisconsin Badger to spend time in the NBA.
10 picks in. We don't have any international players. We don't have any G League Ignite players. But at number 11, Adam, you're going to change that for the Knicks.
We are taking Dyson Daniels. I think he's going to fit with Tom Thibodeau. He is a defensive-minded young player. And I really think it's the overlap of his perimeter size and strength, which makes him multi-positional, the defensive mindset with which he plays. He's got terrific instincts on that end of the floor. And he's also a very good passer. I mean, believe it or not, the areas of his game that he has to work on is his individual offense. You're seeing the catch-and-shoot game right here. That's an area that he made strides in during the Ignite season, but it's got to continue to get better. He's got to continue to get better as an advantage creator and a playmaker. Right now, his best offense is taking smaller guards into the post or utilizing his floater game, but I just think that size, passing, and defense, too much to say no to for anybody coached by Tom Thibodeau.
Yeah, he just turned 19 years old, too, so he's one of the younger prospects in this draft. A 6'7" guard who, like Adam said, is terrific defensively. Some people might argue the best perimeter defender, available in this draft. Only shot, 34% from three-point range with the G League Ignite. That's obviously not terrific, but if you believe that the jump shot can improve and become a real weapon, then a lot of the other stuff you're looking for in backcourt players, that stuff's already there.
All right, let's move on to our first multiple pick team of this draft. The Oklahoma City Thunder are up again at 12 after taking Jabari Smith second. Kyle, who do you have him going with here?
Yeah, I don't know if you can hear that sound, but that is Oklahoma City Thunder GM Sam Presti sprinting to turn in this pick. At number 12 for Jeremy Sohan from Baylor. He's a 6'9" combo forward who was a year ago not even close to being on the one-and-done radar. Emerged because of injuries in part for Baylor last season, as one of their most impactful players. He is first team all defensive menace, a guy who is always in the mix on defense. He is always shaking it up. He's a guy who I think legitimately can guard 1 through 5 in an NBA defense right now, and really talented playmaker as well, a guy that I think is going to be an immediate contributor for an NBA team. The question here, I think for Jeremy Sochan is going to be the shot. He shot just under 30% from 3 as a true freshman, just barely better than that in catch and shoot situations. I think it's an area where he looks comfortable, but the shot and the percentages aren't quite there. But defensively, I think he's going to be a difference maker, and I'm buying the shot long term. At number 12, I think this is a good developmental pick for the Thunder.
To add to Jabari Smith and the Thunder with the 30th pick, the final pick in the first round as well. The Hornets at 13, and Gary selecting for Michael Jordan's team.
We will take Jalen Duren out of the University of Memphis. I created something of a weird controversy last summer when I watched Jalen Duren for the first time, once we started re-entering gyms, after the start of the pandemic. And at this time, he was rated as the number 1 prospect in his class. And I sort of pointed out that, typically, at least from my perspective, number 1 prospects in a high school class are candidates to be number 1 draft picks in an NBA draft. And he didn't really look like that to me because he was more of a traditional center than a modern center, and I couldn't imagine anybody spending maybe even a top 5 pick on somebody like that. Fast forward to today, and there's a good chance he will go outside of the top 10 for all of the reasons I thought or assumed last summer. But all of that said, he's still a really interesting NBA prospect. Legit 6'11", incredible body, can really move well. Without the ball. Skill set still developing, but there's some potential there even as a passer. And he did block more than 2 shots a game at Memphis, which suggests he can be a rim protector, which is something Charlotte obviously needs. On that note, I would also at this point consider Mark Williams at a Duke for a lot of the same reasons, but simply put, with both of those prospects on the table, I think Duren's the better long-term prospect. I'd go with him.
Yeah, I agree with Gary here. I don't think top 10 is probably in Jalen Duren's outcomes in this draft, even after being, formerly the number 1 recruit in his respective recruiting class. But at number 13, especially for a team in Charlotte who is probably looking to upgrade its front court, you could do worse than Jalen Duren, absolutely. He's a really efficient scorer around the rim, a guy who's a great transition player, really skilled shot blocker. And Charlotte's going to want to add someone who can be kind of a lob threat for the Hornets, especially next to LaMelo Ball. I think Jalen Duren is exactly that. And number 13, I think this is a good pick.
All right, one more lottery pick. It's the Cavs at 14. Adam?
Well, the Cavs are a team that made tremendous strides last year. They've got great young talent, and I think they are going to keep a local product at home with Malachi Branham, who exceeded all expectations at his freshman season at Ohio State. To put it in perspective, when this guy was in high school, we considered him a combo forward. He was very much an open floor slasher and mid-range and in scorer. At Ohio State, he really showed he had more guard skills than advertised. He's got a compact three-point shot. He started to play with the ball in his hands more often. He's got to get much, much better on the defensive end of the floor, but he knows that. In fact, he incorporated defensive drills into his pro day last week at the NBA Combine. So we are buying the character here. We are buying the fact that he has improved. His rate of improvement has been off the charts in the last couple of years, and we're buying keeping the hometown product close to home and joining a talented young core under Kobe Altman.
All right, those are your 14 lottery picks here as we go through the first round in our CBS Sports HQ NBA Mock Draft 1.0. The number 1 overall pick in this mock for the Orlando Magic was Chet Holmgren, followed by Jabari Smith and Paolo Bancaro. Keegan Murray was 4. Jaden Ivey rounded out the top 5. Ochai Agbaji went number 8 to the Pelicans. Johnny Davis out of Wisconsin to the Wizards at 10. And very first non-college player going at 11 in Dyson Daniels to the New York Knicks. That is our lottery mock draft. But 14 picks into our NBA mock draft. The lottery is complete. Chet, Jabari, Paolo, 1, 2, 3. Keegan Murray, Jaden Ivey round out the top 5. Shaedon Sharpe, who did not play for Kentucky this past season, did not play any college ball, but was on the Kentucky team, goes 6 to the Pacers. And a couple of names that college basketball fans know very well there at 8 and 10, in Agbaji and Davis to the Pelicans and Wizards, respectively. Malachi Branham, the last one off the board in the lottery, 14 to the Cleveland Cavaliers. Chris Hassel with our 3 mock general managers, Gary Parrish, Adam Finkelstein, and Kyle Boone. It's the Hornets up for a second time here at number 15. Gary, you just had them taking Jalen Duren at 13. Who do you have him taking here?
We'll go another frontcourt player, Tari Eason out of LSU, who really didn't do much at Cincinnati. Was off of most people's radar in his freshman season, but transferred to LSU and was phenomenal. Averaged 17 points per game, showed real explosiveness in transition, grabbed 6.6 rebounds per game, shot above 50% from the field. He's a power forward, but he's the type of guy that, certainly with the way the NBA game is played these days, could shift over and play some small ball 5 as well. And so he's very different than Jalen Duren, who I also have the Hornets being selecting in this draft. But if you are, that Charlotte franchise and you could add Jalen Duren and Tari Eason to your front court, you've really given LaMelo Ball some interesting pieces to try to bring that Charlotte franchise to a place of respectability.
All right, officially halfway through our mock draft now to the Hawks at 16, and Kyle has this pick for Atlanta.
Yeah, number 16, we're going to get Trae Young some help in the backcourt, and they're going to select Kentucky's Ty Washington, a guy who was a really good shooter at Kentucky in his one-and-done season, a really good playmaker, a guy who actually entered college basketball as more of a point guard and played more off the ball at Kentucky. I think he learned to kind of play off the ball as a shooter, as a cutter. I think he's a really smart guy who can play either on or off the ball at the NBA level, a really good creator in the mid-range, and has some, I think, untapped potential as a playmaker that we really didn't see at Kentucky. Sahvir Wheeler really took over the point guard position for Kentucky last season, and when he was out, Ty Washington in his one start playing point guard broke Kentucky's assist record, and that was previously held by John Wall with 17. So I think there's some upside here as well in terms of what he can do as a playmaker. Don't think he's going to take Trae Young's job, but I do think he can ease some of that shot creation and shot making burden from Trae Young. This is where I'm comfortable taking Ty Washington.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said there. He's a terrific guy who can space the floor, be a secondary playmaker on the second side of the floor, but I think he's also going to be able to play some backup point guard. The other thing is he's got that big, strong body type that's going to be a nice change of pace from Trae, so it's going to force opposing defenses to kind of rotate their matchups accordingly, but a good pick and good value increasing spacing in Atlanta.
There's an interesting thing about Kentucky players, not all but some, is they don't show everything they are in their time in Lexington. A great example of that is, Karl Anthony Towns barely shot three-pointers at Kentucky, and now he's arguably the best, shooting big in the world. And I say that to point out that Ty Washington, for understandable reasons, didn't spend all of his time, or even a lot of his time, as Kentucky's primary point guard, because he was teammates with Sahvir Wheeler. But he is a point guard who can obviously play off the ball as well. He's got good enough size to do that. And he was terrific until injuries didn't derail his only season at Kentucky, but certainly complicated it. I was on the sideline for CBS Sports when he had to leave the game at Auburn. And really after that, it was just one thing after another. I don't think he was ever healthy the rest of the season. But he showed enough before he started getting banged up to justify being taken in the top 20 of this draft and perhaps even the lottery.
He goes 16 to the Hawks in our mock. Let's go to the Rockets at 17. This is a team that for back-to-back seasons has had the worst record in the NBA. They picked Paolo Bancaro third overall, and Adam, you have them taking number 17 as well.
Yeah, and we are thrilled if we're Houston if Mark Williams is still on the board here. He is, in my mind, the second best center prospect in this class. I know that is a little bit of a contrarian opinion, but I do have him over Jalen Duren. And the reason being is I think he's an elite rim protector. He's a bouncy finisher. He's got tremendous size and even better length. I mean, we're talking about a 9'9" standing reach. But I think the crux of the evaluation with Mark Williams is if you believe what you saw last year at Duke is all there is in terms of rim protection and vertical spacing, or if you think he's got more potential than that. I believe he's got the potential to stretch the floor down the road. So if you're talking about a guy who's got that kind of standing reach, can block shots, finish inside, and then stretch it out to the three-point line, at number 17, that is really hard to pass up.
Okay, let's move on to the Chicago Bulls at 18, who faltered down the stretch. And Gary, it's our first international player.
I'm going to have him selecting Ousmane Dieng, who played for the New Zealand Breakers in Australia. Only 18 years old, and I want to be clear, this is a long-term projection. This is not a player who's going to help the Chicago Bulls and probably not anybody else as a rookie. But at some point in a draft, when a talent like this, with this type of upside and potential falls to you, you've got to just snatch him up. And if I'm Chicago at this point in the draft, that is what I'm doing. He's got terrific size. You see him with the ability to make shots. There's still a lot of room to grow, and he does need to grow a lot. And I don't mean physically, but just as a player. But, this is arguably a top 10 talent in the draft. And if you can get him all the way down at 18, I feel pretty good about that.
Okay, let's move on to the last pick in the teens, the Minnesota Timberwolves at number 19. Kyle has the pick.
Yeah, at number 19, we're going to pick J Liddell from Ohio State. J Liddell was a guy who last year could have been possibly a late first-round pick. He tested the draft waters, decided to come back, and what did he do? He trimmed down, he lost a little bit of weight, he looked a little bit more fluid, and he improved his outside shot with Ohio State, and I think was one of the best, easily one of the top two Big Ten players last season in college basketball. He's only 6'7" and 240 pounds. I think that's a question and certainly a concern if you're projecting him to be a modern-day power forward in the NBA. But he plays like he's 6'10", 250. Not really concerned with it. The physical presence that he brings down low, combined with his modern game as kind of a floor spacer. J Liddell here going off the board at number 19.
And into the 20s we go. The San Antonio Spurs up for the second time. Adam, you had him taking Benedict Mathurin, number 9, out of Arizona, and you're staying out west, but with a much smaller school for this pick.
Yeah, we're going to continue to buy on high upside, kind of multi-positional perimeter guys. Jalen Williams out of Santa Clara was arguably the biggest winner from last week's NBA Draft Combine. And to be clear, I'm not putting too much stock in the Draft Combine, but this is a late bloomer who I think checks a variety of boxes. He has grown multiple inches in the last couple of years. Wasn't even a high major prospect in high school, but he is getting better with each passing year. And I think his best basketball is years in front of him. If you are the Spurs and you are looking for long-term stocks, that is what they have done historically. This player gives them one who might not hit for a couple of years, but certainly has a high upside down the road.
Yeah, to Adam's point, Jalen Williams right now, I think is one of the fastest rising prospects in this year's NBA draft class. 6'6", measured at 7'2" with his wingspan out of Santa Clara. A guy who is a 97th percentile spot-up shooter over the last few years. He's a really good three-point shooter. The size, the length, the ability to play multiple positions on the wing, either at the 2 or the 3, I think is really valuable. He's a guy who I think wouldn't be surprised if he ends up going in the lottery, so getting him here at number 20 I think is really good value.
The Nuggets are up at 21, and Gary, it's a guy that a lot of high school and college basketball fans heard a lot about going into his college, turned out to be semi-pro career in the G League. He was a top 5 recruit.
Yeah, Jaden Hardy, who is a terrific scorer, actually led the G League Ignite in scoring, averaged 21.2 points per game. That comes naturally to him. And so this is a guy, like you said, at one point was projected as a top 10 pick. His stock has slipped a little bit because, in part, he didn't shoot it well with the G League Ignite, under 34% from three-point range. But a lot of that seems to be about shot selection. Coaches will tell you all the time that the key to shooting a better percentage from the perimeter is to take better shots, or at least often. It's just to take better shots. And so if he can get that under control and manageable, then a lot of the other stuff is there. Again, this is a guy who scoring comes naturally to him, and to get him so deep into the first round of this draft, it's not where anybody thought you'd be able to get a prospect like this a year ago. But the way things have played out, he could reasonably be available here. And if you're Denver, you're thrilled that you could get a prospect of this nature outside of the top 20.
Yeah, I think this is terrific value in the 20s. To me, he's got a chance to be a Jamal Crawford type microwave scorer. Despite leading Ignite in scoring last year, he did not have the season that most expected him to. A year ago, he was the best tough shot maker in all of high school basketball. No one was better at creating space or making shots off the dribble. And that is a prototype that is in high demand in today's NBA. So I think when you come back and get to that decision-making that Gary was alluding to, down at the end of the shot clock, there's just not many guys in this year's draft who can create space and create shots like he can. I love the pick.
All right, let's move to number 22. It's the Memphis Grizzlies. Kyle, I'm not sure how you wrestled away mock GM duties from Gary Parrish. This is his hometown team. He's usually all over this.
That's right. Yep. And I'm going to make him proud here. I'm going to take Dallin Terry out of Arizona. Memphis, over the last few years, this front office really has kind of emerged as like a type. Kind of the type of prospect that they're looking for. Dallin Terry, I think, checks all the boxes of the type of prospect that this front office is looking for. He's tough, he's competitive, he plays hard at all times, a glue guy. At Arizona, he was last season as a sophomore, as kind of a rebounder, a scorer, playmaker, does a little bit of everything, and averaged 36.4% from the three-point line this past season. I think if he comes back to college next season, we could be talking about Dallin Terry as one of the best guards in the country. And if you can get him here, I think at number 22 in this draft, looking ahead, if he comes back, I think he could solidify himself as a lottery guy. Get him at number 22 in this draft, I think, would be really good value. So be really pleased getting him at number 22.
All right, let's recap 15 through 22 as we head out of the lottery and into many playoff teams. We did see our first international player go off the board with Gary making that selection. We also had another G League Ignite player, Jaden Hardy, at number 21 to the Nuggets. To conclude our first NBA mock draft, less than a month to go until the NBA draft. We have three of our mock general managers making our picks. This was how the lottery went down, with Chet Holmgren going number 1 overall, followed by Jabari Smith and Paolo Bancaro. And then 15 through 22, as we get out of the lottery, we get our first international selection to the Bulls at 18. Jaden Hardy, 21 to the Nuggets, a guy who many thought would be a top 10 pick in this draft, but just did not have a great season with the G League Ignite, so maybe some good value there at 21. Chris Hassel, joined by Gary Parrish, Adam Finkelstein, and Kyle Boone. It's the Nets at 23, and Adam has the pick.
And we are going to take Marjon Beauchamp. And the reason being, I think this point in the draft, there are not any sure thing contributors, in my opinion, left on the board. So we're going to take a swing on future upside. And Beauchamp is that guy. He is long. He is smooth. He really became an unexpected, pleasant surprise for the Ignite this year. He was a player that was obviously full of talent in high school, but there were a lot of questions about just the situation around him. He was at 4 schools in 4 different years. He started his college career at a junior college. This is actually his second year outside of high school. But he really impressed people last week in Chicago. He was real. He was transparent. He talked about poor decisions he'd made in the past and growth he had made. And I think he had enough executives walking away from that experience saying, you know what, this is a young man we want to take a shot on because we can see his talent. It's obvious, and it seems like he's really, really growing as a person right now.
Bucks are up next to 24. The draft order at this point in the draft goes by winning percentage in the NBA regular season. Has nothing to do with postseason finish. So it's the Milwaukee Bucks up here at 24. Gary, you have it.
Well, if I don't get to select for my Memphis Grizzlies, I can at least select my little homie from Memphis, Kennedy Chandler, who played his 1 season of college basketball for the Tennessee Volunteers. Just a terrific one-and-done point guard who I've known for quite a bit of a time. Have known his family for a while. Comes from a really strong family. He's got a great base, and he's just been a winner at every level of basketball. He won state titles in high school. He won national titles on the grassroots circuit. He won an SEC tournament title at Tennessee, and he shot 38% from three-point range. So he's not just a point guard who can run your team. He can really consistently knock down shots from the perimeter. The issue, and the only reason he would be available this deep in the draft, is that he's small, measured under 6 foot at the combine. But I'm just going to trust him to figure it out because, being small has never been anything that's kept him from being great before.
There are two teams that have 3 picks in the first round. The San Antonio Spurs are one of them. They took Benedict Mathurin 9th, Jalen Williams out of Santa Clara 20th. Adam, who do you have them taking 25th?
We are taking Pat Baldwin. And listen, he had a bad freshman year. He went to Milwaukee, had that ankle injury. He chose to play for his dad over an opportunity to go to Duke and a variety of blue bloods. He was put in a situation where he had the ball in his hand and he had to be a playmaker. I do not think that is his game. His game is being a pure shooter of the basketball. He's 6'10" plus. And in the NBA, offense is all about spacing. You are not going to find many guys his size who can create more spacing with their ability to shoot the basketball. Now, he has got to get tougher and more productive inside the paint. Whether it's finishing, rebounding, defending in the post, those are things he has got to address. But you cannot teach the overlap of his size and skill, specifically his ability to shoot the basketball.
Value for Patrick Baldwin, a guy who, not long ago was the #1 recruit in his respective recruiting class. He's dealt with injuries each of the last 2 seasons. It ended his freshman season at Milwaukee. It ended his senior season in high school, but 6'9", measured out at 7'2" in terms of his wingspan. Positional size, I think, is at a premium here. His shooting, I think, is going to translate. And you're talking about roles. The role that he played at Milwaukee is not going to be the same role that he plays in the NBA. I think if you give him some NBA spacing, make him kind of a premium scorer, he's going to fit right in as an NBA wing, and I think is going to be a difference maker. So, again, at number 25 here, this is excellent value.
And Kyle, right back to you, number 26 for the Dallas Mavericks.
At number 26, I'm taking Jake LaRavia from Wake Forest. This is another weapon for Luca Doncic, which is exactly what they need. LaRavia is a guy who is a killer shooter. He shot almost 39% from the three-point line last season with Wake Forest. Can make plays off the bounce. He's pretty athletic. A guy who I think can be a shot creator at the NBA level. A really selfless player. And Dallas has a system, I think, right now that obviously revolves around Luca Doncic. It revolves around moving the ball and playing selfless. That is exactly LaRavia's game. A really good complementary piece, I think he will be in the NBA. So you're trying to add talent around Luca Doncic. I think LaRavia can give that to Dallas.
All right, to number 27 we go, and Gary with the pick for the Miami Heat.
We'll take Walker Kessler out of Auburn. He's a traditional big, undeniably, and those aren't the best things to be in the year 2022. But I still think every basketball team needs real size and a traditional big, at least on the roster, for very specific matchups and situations. And at this point in the draft, Walker Kessler is the best available. He averaged 4.6 blocks per game at Auburn, in helping the Tigers secure the #1 ranking in the AP poll for the first time in school history. Just an excellent rim protector. And yes, there will be situations in playoff basketball where he's tough to play because he'll be asked to guard in space, and that obviously isn't his strength. But there's still, real value to having a rim protector, at this level on your roster. And if you're Miami, it's a great option, this deep in the first round.
We are finishing up our first round mock here on CBS Sports HQ. The Warriors coming up picking number 28. Adam has that pick.
Arizona's Christian Koloko. There are a lot of talented guards on the board here, but Koloko has a clear niche, and it's one that Golden State doesn't really have in their roster right now. James Wiseman, he's been a question mark. Kevon Looney's been great inside, but Koloko gives them a true rim protector in the middle, someone who can really just put a lid on the basket. The other thing, he gets rave reviews. All of the intel about him, about his character, about him as a teammate, it is phenomenal. This is a guy who can impact the game without needing touches. He can go out and set screens for their shooters and be very content to protect the rim. I think he's got a chance to make that roster and be a rotation player for a team that is presumably now in a position to keep contending for NBA championships for the next couple of years.
2 picks to go. The Grizzlies with 2 picks in the first round. They took Dallin Terry, number 22. Kyle, who do you have him going with at number 29?
Yeah, they're going to come back at number 29 and grab another guard, a guy who I think is a Memphis fit, again, to a T, Christian Braun. Christian Braun, I think, is easily the best trash talker in this draft class, a guy who's really skilled as a transition player, really athletic off the bounce, a guy who was really a difference maker for Kansas in winning its national championship. Came up with big shots down the stretch to kind of seal it for the Jayhawks. Really high IQ as a cutter on offense, and I think is going to be a really good team defender in the NBA. Really someone who's going to be a floor raiser, and for a Memphis team that I think is already contending for a playoff spot year in and year out, so long as John Morant is there, Christian Braun's a guy I think who can be kind of an off-the-bench addition for the Grizzlies that can really help them out long term.
Yeah, when you get a rotation player late in the first round, that's a win. And Christian Braun has positional size. He's got positional length. He's a solid athlete. He can shoot the ball. And he does have that competitive gene that Kyle just mentioned. So I agree that is good value here at the end of the first round.
All right, final pick in the first round, Oklahoma City Thunder, and it's their last of 3 picks in this round. Kyle?
Yeah, that's right. This is OKC's third first-rounder in the draft. I'm going to take Caleb Houston out of Michigan. I imagine that they're going to take a big swing here. I think Caleb Houston is probably the biggest swing that is left standing on the board. Houston was one of just a handful of players who actually turned down an invite to attend the NBA Draft Combine. There's some speculation behind the scenes that he may have a promise, and somewhere in this range feels about right. He's a former 5-star recruit. He started his season slow at Michigan, but really finished with some promising flashes. A guy who has really great size for a wing, good shooting foundation, shot it a lot better from 3-point range than I think people give him credit for. And someone I think with the tools to take a gamble on, especially at number 30 for a team that is already kind of in a rebuilding mode with OKC, Caleb Houston at number 30 is the pick for the Thunder.
Yeah, he was a better prospect than player in his 1 year at Michigan, but still had moments where he showed that he's a legitimate first-round prospect. And like Kyle said, he shut it down at the Combine. There's some thought that he got a promise, some thought more specifically that the promise came from Oklahoma City, so this would make some sense.
All right, our thanks to Gary Parrish, Kyle Boone, Adam Finkelstein for playing the role of our mock GMs here on our first mock draft here on CBS Sports HQ with the NBA Draft about 4 weeks away. We still have to finish up the conference finals, and then we have the NBA finals, but this is how our mock went down. Chet Holmgren went first, followed by Jabari Smith, who's the favorite to go number 1. Then Paolo Bancaro, Keegan Murray, and Jaden Ivey. As you see the rest of the lottery as well. We didn't get our first non-college player until after 10. We didn't get our first international player until 18 to the Bulls, and just a handful of non-college players in this first round mock draft, which ended up with Oklahoma City Thunder finishing up with Caleb Houston at number 30. They had 3 picks in the first round, as do the San Antonio Spurs, a few other teams with multiple picks, but those 2 teams have the most. Ion College Basketball Podcast, really getting you ready for the NBA Draft. The last 2 episodes, Gary Parrish and Matt Norlander with full breakdowns of Jabari Smith and Chet Holmgren.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.